Episode 2 of The Witcher absolutely capitalizes on what I think was a masterpiece of episode 1 and brings us even more characters and really begins to build the plot out. I think we can start to see the real arc that this season is going to go through. Now, I always want to say to you guys, hey, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. I love this show, but I want to hear from you guys, so leave a comment down below on what you think. And subscribe if you guys want more content just like this. But without any further ado, let's dive into the world of the continent and see the latest things that have been happening in episode 2. And yes, by the way, the continent is the actual name of the world The Witcher takes place in, so maybe not the most creative writing, but I guess it'll do. Episode 2 opens by introducing us to a new character named Yennefer. And first things first, I want to say, guys, don't be fooled. Yennefer is just the fantasy realm version of Jennifer. But in all seriousness, guys, she is an absolutely lovable character who's going to have a huge and very important arc. In just the first 3 minutes, we see her being bullied, told what to do, mistreated, and eventually sold by her father for less than the price of a pig. I feel so bad for her. She is one of the most characters I feel the most sympathy for in the show. I absolutely love her. And funny thing is she's really kicked around. She's got this disease that gives her essentially a hunchback, and but the funny thing is that all in all, she's still like this really tough character, and by the end of the episode, really kind of finishes positive for her, at least, as we learn that she can do magic. The episode starts by her accidentally teleporting. She even slaps Astrid in the face, or Astrid, you can call him whatever you want. But anyways, she's a really great character, and she's one of my favorite characters, and it leads me to the first thing that I want to talk about in this episode, guys, as we review The Witcher episode 2, is characters. This show does an absolutely fantastic job with characters, and as of right now, there's really kind of a big three that you need to know about. So the main three characters in the show right now are, of course, our main man, the Witcher, as well as Ciri and Yennefer. She is new, didn't show up in the first episode, but like I said, she plays a massive role, and she's going forward. One of the interesting things with this is after Yennefer, who's shown as being pretty helpless, at least as of the start, we know she has magic, but currently has no way of using it, and so yeah, she is currently pretty helpless. We then cut to Ciri, who is really also pretty helpless. We see her just wandering around the woods, not knowing what to do, and she almost eats poison berries and die. Thankfully, a homeless elf saves her. But let's not dig too much into that right now. Her story in this episode seems pretty flat. She catches up with her people after they fled the city, and that's really about all she does. Finally, 13 minutes into the episode is the first time that we get to see Geralt, which is really interesting because that's over a fifth of the way into the episode, reminding us, as I said in a previous video, that he is the main character, but the show is so much more than just him killing monsters, and there's a lot going on, and a lot that we still have to be introduced to. We'll talk more later about that season plot arc. But for now, I want to talk about Geralt, who is just, I love him. He, along with the other two, they're just great characters as a whole, and he really embodies who I am as a person when he is asked what he's looking for, and he responds, blessed silence. He is really a loner and a quiet guy, and he's really essentially the one character in the show right now that doesn't really want anything but to be left alone. The other two characters have desires, they have goals, but they're unable to act upon those desires and goals. Whereas Geralt is forced to act when he doesn't want to. It's a really nice way to sort of flip the script. And then he meets some elves, he gets captured. We'll talk about that later. But like I said, this episode really kicks off the plot, but it's interesting that, again, it kicks off the plot and really sticks towards characters as well as that plot, and they don't do as much fighting, as much battle scenes in this episode. The first one had some pretty cool fights, the second one not so much, and again, that's the reminder of there's a lot more going on here than simply killing monsters, and that's something that I really love about the show. But let's talk about it. Let's get into probably, I think, the biggest part about this episode as far as implications for the future, or at least there are a few things to look at. So far, this show has absolutely chosen to focus on characters and their character arc and their goals and their wishes and just who they are as a people. So, right after our introduction with Yennefer, we cut to Ciri, who is of royal bloodline, but recently went all Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and got her life turned upside down. She is now roaming the woods and almost eats some poison berries and almost dies before some homeless boy or something saves her, and then she catches up with her people who fled the city after being defeated in battle. That's pretty much her entire episode. We can tell that they're leading up to some more things happening with her next episode, but there's really nothing else to mention here. Then finally, like 13 minutes into the show, or over a fifth of the way into the show, we finally see our main man, the Witcher himself, Geralt. And his character arc is really beginning to start, and we're really starting to see more of who he is. While I mentioned last episode that he felt a little bit bland of a character, he sort of continued that trend this week in this episode, but he did it in a more interesting way by showing us that he's not just a bland character, that's really sort of his personality, and he really embodies who I am as a person when somebody asks him what he's looking for, and he responds, "Blessed silence," which is absolutely something I think we've all felt from time to time. And they're really pushing this idea with him, by not showing him until over a fifth of the way into the episode, that yes, he is the main character, he's really important, but the show's about more than just him. And it's so interesting, again, that we haven't really begun diving into his wants or his desires. He's just simply a quiet character right now who just gets stuff done. It's a real contrast to the other two characters. Both Ciri and Yennefer have desires, they have wants, and they're currently unable to go out and get those wants and get those desires. And so that's something that really makes them interesting. The one guy in this show, or the one good guy, I should say, in this show, who's got the power to take action, chooses not to because he has no desire to take action. It's really interesting. And like I said, these are really the three main characters of the show, so I hope you like them because they're not going anywhere. In fact, they're going to drive the plot for a very long time. The other interesting thing being, this episode really chose to focus on character and plot and leaned even further away from action. Last episode, I talked about how it wasn't just action, there was plot and character. This episode, there's even less action and less fight scenes. I didn't necessarily think that was a bad thing, but I hope this trend doesn't continue. I would hate to see an entire season with this little action, but like I mentioned, huge things happening in the plot, so let's get moving on to that and talking about kind of what we're beginning to see as the main arc of the season. So probably the second biggest thing that happened in this episode was when Yennefer was sold, when her family just sold her to this random mysterious lady who was looking for her, who turns out to be kind of this rude, like magical tutor, so to speak. She gathers all of these women together, I believe there's like 6 of them, and is attempting to teach them magic. Again, as we mentioned very early on in the episode, Yennefer shows that she has the ability to teleport, but she does get to this place with all these other girls and begins training and seriously struggles. It's really interesting because this weird magical tutor slave owner lady, that's the stupidest name for her, but that's what I'm going to call her. She's kind of a jerk, she's kind of mean, but she's definitely not yet a villain. In fact, she almost takes over a motherly role for Yennefer, but like in a weird way. She's like a tutor, a mentor, a mother, but one who's also kind of hates her own kid, if that makes any sense. One of those like hockey moms who like pushes their sons to be way too good at the sport and doesn't like care about anything else except them going pro. That's kind of what it's like. That's really the best and probably only comparison that I have. She also delivers this awesome line, which is balance in control, says balance and control, without them chaos will kill you. And that really seems to be the thematic drive of the show right now, which is the world is chaos, the world is falling apart all around you, and our main characters are going to need to work their butts off to control that chaos, or else it's going to kill them. Pretty straightforward, but I felt like it was a really nice way to have this sentence that sums up the show so far. And then we get this awesome Tower of Gold scene. I'm not going to spoil anything for you, just go watch the episode. It was one of my favorite scenes of the show so far. It was really cool. And then, again, that's pretty much about it. she just starts to learn her magic. She starts to learn some new skills and things like that in these pretty cool scenes. Nothing super big happens, but you can tell that we're growing this super powerful witch with a lot of abilities who's going to definitely step up later on to be one of the most impactful people of the show. As I mentioned earlier, she hasn't been impactful so far. The show or the story has impacted her and not the other way around, but soon she's definitely going to be one of the catalysts, so make sure to keep an eye out for that. But let's get to the next thing I want to talk about, which is probably the biggest part of the show so far. All right, so one of the biggest things that happens in this episode is probably the thing that you have to see most is when Gerald the Witcher, the main man, goes on this quest with a bard who pays him to help find this devil who's been bothering him. They go out on this quest and sure enough, they get captured, they get kidnapped, but surprisingly, it's by elves, and this is the first appearance that we have from elves in the show so far. And this is really important because one of them is like the main man, the king, the head honcho, and of course the elves are really mad. So the background on this being that, and we don't know the details on it yet, but humans really screwed over elves and almost extinct them, and now the elves live up in these mountains far away from everybody else, and they're really seeking revenge on humans, which quite honestly, at least from what we know so far, is pretty understandable. It's important to note that I think going forward they're going to be really formidable, and they're going to be probably the main bad guys of the story. Again, we don't know their motivations or anything like that, but they kidnap these two guys and they're going to kill them, and they decide not to for whatever reason. We'll probably learn that next episode. But again, that is probably the big thing. We get some backstory on this world. It's really important to note that a lot of the story of The Witcher takes place before this show starts, and so there's a lot we still have to catch up on and understand, and then we just kind of got thrown into the deep end, which again I said in the last episode is not a problem. I think they do a great job explaining this story and getting us caught up in the world, but again, that is very important to know. And another thing that's really important, guys, is this show is absolutely beautiful. I would be remiss to not talk about how gorgeous the landscapes, the set, the makeup, the artists, the visual effects, and everything on this show comes together to build an awesome world, and it looks fantastic. I got no complaints with it whatsoever. One of the things that always makes me jealous is all the characters have really cool, like green or brown or purple eyes. I wish that was me. I wish I had these just bright, shiny purple eyes, but I don't. But anyways, like I said, that's one of the things I love most about the show. I think it's just a small detail. It's not this important like plot or character or story or anything. It just brings like a real sense of realism to it and helps draw me into the world. But that's probably one of my hidden favorites of the show. I want to know from you guys what one of your favorite parts of the show is. And as I said earlier, subscribe for more content. I'm going to be continuing to post The Witcher content every single day, and I hope you guys will join me as we continue to go through this awesome story.